so very, very much. And Martha and Ken, thank you for, one, inviting me, you and Dee inviting me, and for you and Ken to open your home. And as you always do for things for West Vinings Place, it's just, it truly is wonderful what you do. I had shared with Martha and Dee, there was a book that came out recently by, his name is Tim Carney, and the title was Alienated America, Why Some Places Thrive and Others Collapse. And West Vinings Place is a wonderful example of a small community that thrives because of involvement. Dee and Martha are truly the glue that holds this neighborhood together. There's no question about that. Everybody is invited, everybody, it's totally inclusive, everybody's invited. Even if you don't participate, you know it's available, and it's psychologically beneficial to know that the things are going on, and that you can enter at any time and people are delighted to see you, and it's all good. So, thank you, darling, I appreciate it. Before I actually start to tell you all, just a short prayer, no heads bowed, no eyes closed, just to say that I pray that the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart will be acceptable in God's sight. And I pray that it'll also be acceptable and something that will be beneficial to everybody who hears. In the name of Jesus, amen.
Amen.
Blake and I are delighted to be here and to have the opportunity to share our story, which is the witness of the power of God in a family's life. The story in the book is about redemption and restoration, and it offers lessons for any reader. It is a story about love, the love of God for a family who cried out to Him in the midst of their pain and anguish. It's about the love of a husband and wife who made a commitment to stay together in spite of the circumstances. And it's about the love of family whose bond could not be broken. It's also the story about advancing through adversity. As Stephen and Blake and I have always said, a person doesn't have to be going to prison to be living in a prison of their own making. At one time or another in life, we encounter adversity. All of us will. It comes in all varieties. Sometimes it's just broken dreams, let's say from a failed marriage, or it's the broken dreams that you have for your children, and those dreams don't pan out. Or it's financial setback, or it's business failure, or it's health issues, your own or that of the person that you love. Your parents can die too soon, or your spouse is taken away too soon, or even there's the death of a child, or it can be prison, and that's what our story is about tonight. The list is honestly endless. Adversity comes into every life, and if it has not already hit you, you can count on the fact that it will. And that's not meant to be a downer, but to say to you that adversity can be the very best thing that ever happens to you. Adversity can absolutely change your life. And if there's nothing else that I say tonight for you to take away, please know that Blake and Stephen and I feel that prison was a gift. It was the gift of perspective, and it radically changed us for the good. My husband's original book, which is the same title, Daddy, Why Are You Going to Jail?, was published in 1992 by Harold Shaw Publishers, and it had a foreword by the late Chuck Colson. And it was a very successful Christian book, and we gave the royalties from the sale of that book to Prison Fellowship. So this is the original book. And 6 or 7 years ago, we were encouraged to republish the original book, but to include those things that happened to us after he came home from prison. So we were encouraged to write it and we decided we would do the next 34 years. And so this is the second edition. This is the one.
Size difference.
Right, it's quite a size difference. I mean, it's really kind of a double book. The original book was never written with the idea of publication. It was written to express a father's heart for his precious son. He wanted Blake to someday understand the entire situation, and when he was old enough to ask questions. And Stephen wanted Blake to understand his heart and the spiritual transformation that had taken place in his life. He wanted Blake to know how he had lost his way. Once back home, Stephen obviously had to have a job, but I went off every morning to work, and Blake went off to school, and so by 8 o'clock in the morning, the house was empty. And we had an old IBM Selectric typewriter, you'll remember those, and Stephen would sit down at that typewriter, and he wrote 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. And he wrote, and he wanted to get the whole, and he said while his memory is still fresh, he wanted to get everything down on paper. He wrote about the funny characters that he met in prison. He wrote about from his early experiences in life all the way through to the time that he went. And he also wrote about the events, which honestly were the events of absurdity. So Martha asked me, she said, can you give me a bio? And I said, I tell you what, I said, I think I'm going to include a lot of that in what I talk about. So I was born in Atlanta, so that makes me a native, right? I attended E. Rivers Elementary School. You know, E. Rivers right there in Peachtree at Peachtree Battle. I graduated from Northside High School in 1960. And my parents divorced when I was 6 years old. And I want to tell you all, I'm old. And back then, I didn't know anybody growing up in Buckhead whose parents were divorced. I thought I was the only one. Our life changed dramatically. We went from a home on Habersham Way to an apartment. And it was a totally different life than my sister, who was 12 years older, than she had experienced. She had experienced a two-parent family, and life was entirely different. My dad moved to Chicago, and I only saw him once a year, you know, in the summertime, when I would go spend maybe 6 weeks with him. My sister, being 12 years older, married, she was out of the house, and so it was just mother and me. I danced with the Atlanta Civic Ballet, and I signed an annual contract at the age of 13, and that was to be in the junior company. And of course, your goal was to be in the senior company. I made that, okay? So I danced all through high school, and I think actually into my freshman year of college. I knew I wanted to pursue the arts and to be a dancer and an actress. I didn't know about actress yet, but I knew I wanted to be a dancer. I turned down a full scholarship to Sullins College. Sullins doesn't even exist anymore, I don't think, but it was located right on the border of Virginia and Tennessee, and in an obscure place and impossible to get there. And the Tri-Cities Airport didn't exist back then. And I realized Mother would probably take me up and drop me off, and I wouldn't be home until summertime. So I turned down that scholarship, and I attended Georgia State because it allowed me to continue with acting and dancing and taking modeling assignments. I was signed up with the Atlanta Models and Talent, and so there were a lot of things that came along, and it helped support what I was doing, and that was great. During college, I acted in a number of local productions. I don't mean college productions, I mean local productions, Theater Atlanta, Pocket Theater. All of you are too young to remember all of that, but that's what I did. And I started out, the first play I ever did was Auntie Mame. I did not play Auntie Mame. I played, and I actually remember the name of the character. Her name was Gloria Upson, and she was described in the script as the upper girls' school girl. I played a number of comedic roles, but to this day, I cannot tell a joke. I cannot remember the bad punchline. It's over for me. But I had very good comedy timing for theater, so that part was good. I made a number of commercials before I went to New York, and I made a couple of commercials for the CNS Bank. You all remember them. I did a lot of radio voice work, and I even had a movie contract. So let me tell you about this contract. The stipulation in the contract said that I would not get into the sun prior to the film being, what's the word I'm looking for?
Shot.
Yeah, thank you. Before production started on the film. And that was not a red flag to either. My mother was so thrilled because Mother really, this was Mother's joy and pleasure. I think I lived vicariously for Mother's sake. Or she lived vicariously through my work, but neither one of us caught the red flag of no sun and no tan lines. But then I got a copy of the script, duh, and there was nudity in that film, and I said, no thank you, I am absolutely not going to do that. And I was able, through some negotiations, with a family friend, was able to extract me from that movie contract. And believe it or not, that movie was about Lenin and Trotsky during that period in Mexico. Does that ring a bell? Trotsky, yes, okay, but he was a Leninite, okay. And where did a pale blonde fall into this?
A naked one.
A naked one. Where did that fall in? I have no idea. But the good thing that came out of that contract is I never got in the sun again. And I mean, I really did not abuse myself in the sun. And then ultimately, we all know about SPF 50. So. I mean, Miss Vicky knows about that with her hat and her long sleeves and SPF 50. Okay. So I arrived in New York at age 21 with $1,000 that I had saved up, and I recognized that it was quickly going to be completed, so I needed to start working soon. I lived at, and I only mention this because it's iconic, I lived at the Barbizon Hotel for Women. And you see, you nod in your heads. Everybody has read this in novels. Everyone knows about the Barbizon Hotel, and it probably closed down maybe in the 70s. I'm not sure. But it was everything that you read. It was safe. That was the biggest thing. It was safe for a young woman, so that part was good. I met Stephen in New York, and he was not in show business. I, of course, was pursuing that career in theater and dance, and I had no intention of getting married before the age of 30. That seemed fair to me. And you know what? I was struck by love, and we married in 1966. We were committed to living in New York City, and we'd even put a deposit down on an apartment before the wedding. However, I had ongoing bouts with bronchitis and had been sick a lot, and so my doctor sent me to a pulmonologist, and he said that, you know how those commercials, and my doctor said, okay, well, he said that if I continued to live in New York City with the air pollution and the secondary smoke, and of course the fact that I smoked, I would have emphysema within 10 years. He said, my best advice to you is to get out of New York and live in the suburbs. Stephen and I said, suburbs? Neither one of us wanted to move to the New York suburbs. That means commuting an hour and a half each way every day. Didn't want to, really and truly did not want to do that. And if you all recall, that many years ago, everybody smoked everywhere. They smoked on the subway. They smoked in a taxi. They smoked in a restaurant. They smoked backstage. Everybody smoked backstage, and which was what a fire hazard with all the costumes and everything, but everybody smoked. And I was smoking 2 bags of cigarettes a day. I didn't smoke all of them. They burned out, you know. But nevertheless, I was buying that many cigarettes. So we knew we had to do something. We came down to Atlanta for our engagement party, and it was in the springtime, and everything was gorgeous and blooming and beautiful. And we had some heart-to-heart conversations, and we decided that it would be better to live in Atlanta, where I had family and friends, than to be in the suburbs outside of New York. And the rest is history. Now, here's where I tell you that Stephen was Jewish, and I was not. I was a Christian in name only. I was an Episcopalian. I was baptized and confirmed at St. Philip's Cathedral in Buckhead, and I grew up there, but somehow the faith never got down deep in my heart. I was a belonger, not a believer. And I say that to people often, and say it again, I was a belonger. I identified as an Episcopalian. That was my church, but I was not a believer in God. And since we planned to live in New York, I had made the suggestion to Stephen, I think that I should convert to Judaism. And I said, because after all, everybody we know in New York is Jewish, and once we have children, it will make things so much easier if we're Jewish. And okay, he thought that that was the most unselfish thing and a wonderful idea, and he was all for it. And then a few days later, maybe a week went by, and I said, honey, I still had planned to convert to Judaism. However, you know, always remember when your wife says however, and she is underlining that however, what if we move out of New York? Well, what if we move south? Well, what if we move to my hometown, to Atlanta? I think you need to be Episcopalian. There was silence, and Stephen said, okay, I think that is only fair, Harvey. You've presented a good plan.